Alright everyone, we start off today with a very major news story, which is that a draft opinion written by the justices at SCOTUS, it's a draft opinion, this isn't the final version, appears to indicate that they will vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now there are several potential ways this could actually pan out from there, because of course overturning Roe v. Wade does not necessitate upholding Dobbs, and vice versa. There were really multiple ways that SCOTUS could and potentially still can go, and importantly, you don't apparently have Justice Roberts, the Chief Justice, signing on explicitly to the majority opinion. You have three Democrats appointed justices dissenting, 5 in favor of overturning Roe v. Wade, but Roberts isn't actually there in the group. It indicates possibly a split opinion. That is, he's not signing on with the majority opinion about the decision. He has his own feelings regarding it, probably being more tempered. If you read the brief write-up from Alito, who's writing the majority decision, it's effectively basically saying Roe v. Wade is terrible. It was a terrible decision. Roberts might say, well, he'd probably waffle. He's a Bush appointee, so he might say, well, I'm not so sure about this whole it's an evil thing, but yeah, the majority rules, and I would have done it slightly differently and tempered Roe v. Wade or something like that. Now, keep in mind, of course, just because you have this leaked draft document does not necessitate that ends up technically even being the final decision. They may have already basically reached their conclusion. This would indicate that likelihood. This is a high degree of chance Roe v. Wade is going bye-bye. However, the actual final argument made could be more tempered. It could be worded differently. Dobbs, of course, addressed differently. Now, before I get into this further, link in the description archived, of course. Politico has obtained this. I know that they're legacy media, but this is purportedly coming directly from the Supreme Court. And it's unlikely in any given instance that SCOTUS releases much of anything before they give their final decision. This is a very uncommon move from the Supreme Court. Maybe the right-wing justices wanted to get it out ahead of the news cycle, just sort of put it out there, get people ready and get them riled up too, so that the decision maybe gets more attention. Keep in mind, down below, if you're watching this video on YouTube, there will be a pinned comment with links to other video hosting sites that I use. Keep in mind, I make exclusive material every day on those platforms. Does not go on YouTube. I have abandoned Dailymotion, so there's only 4 there now. Dailymotion now tries to block you from using the site if you're using ad blocking software, and I ain't playing with that, so it's just not going to happen anymore. It's not like there's any engagement on the site at all anyway. A couple years from now, I predict they'll probably go under, partially because of their poor decision making in regards to ads. Forcing all videos to have ads on them as well, by the way. So basically it has become an on-demand service. Anyway, looking at this decision. First we'll analyze the several possibilities attendant to a decision against Roe v. Wade. They could strike down Roe v. Wade in their decision, because that's being challenged, and say it's unconstitutional. The Constitution doesn't explicitly protect abortion. The way in which Roe v. Wade was initially penned is simply not in keeping with the concept of constitutional law, so we're striking it down. And the fact that you would have the federal prevention of abortion being made outright illegal does not mean you additionally, though, necessarily uphold the fact that you can ban abortion at the state level. In their wording, they could very easily interpret it as, hey, while this protection does not exist, blah, 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 as far as medical decision-making or something, we don't find that Dobbs is acceptable. We don't think that a 6-week limit is okay, and they can then spend 20 or 30 pages elaborating. They have wide latitude when they make an open decision like this. My suspicion is that they will uphold the right of states to make further curbs on abortion. Absent Roe v. Wade, of course, there's really nothing impeding them. That brings us to the analysis of how this affects the political climate. It will reinvigorate some Democratic voters, specifically those on the left wing of the party. It's not going to invigorate like a Joe Manchin, like a 90s Democrat or something. But certainly an AOC will say, oh my God, see, the evil right-wingers, including the 3 Trump justices, are trying to ban abortion. To be clear, this doesn't ban abortion. It simply reiterates that the federal government doesn't really have a role to play in that sense, in the constitutional sense, and that the states have to hash it out. You can then have various fights against states. Maybe they have abortion legal up until the moment of conception, and people have a problem with that and say, look, it's a life, look, whatever, human rights, and they can attempt to implement curbs on abortion. In a state where they attempt to basically outlaw it, as several states have, people could complain and say, look, for various roundabout reasons, that's unacceptable. Ultimately, the GOP would be crazy to phrase this as a moral issue at this particular time, because many people in the country, while they do support more curbs on abortion, that's a majority opinion. The majority of the population wants abortion more restricted. But the majority of the population also wants it to be legal. It's basically a matter within the bulk of the population over where that legality should start and end. That's basically the debate. It doesn't fall down to a moral debate, because if a person believes that abortion is murder, they probably don't support the idea of, well, but I'd make an exception for rape, incest, and allow it up to 8 weeks or something like that. They probably wouldn't insinuate that. I have seen people, and I think that their arguments are the weakest, who are effectively against the concept of abortion for moral reasons. They think it's outright blasphemy. They think it's terrible. It's literally murder, and yet they're for it in some cases. I hate it when people have a tempered opinion like that that's really self-contravening. I'd rather them just say, hey, no, I don't support abortion. Or simply say, hey, I have misgivings about it, but, it should be legal, and don't do the moral argument thing, do a pragmatic argument thing, or something that's at least coherent. Here's how it would affect, potentially, the midterms. While it will invigorate that left-wing part of the population, it'll give them higher turnout, etc., although there's really no remedy for the situation, so I don't know. They'll use it as a marketing tactic, a campaign tactic, but really they're not going to be able to deliver anything for the morons voting for them. Again, the majority of the population wants further limits on abortion. I'm in the minority when I say that I don't. If it ends up a states' right issue, what happens, I think, is that it politicizes and polarizes the states more. Again, the problem for the Democrats is that that's not going to go in their advantage. Not in the red states, not in the swing states, only in the hyper-blue states that aren't going to do anything further on abortion anyway. California is not going to implement any further limitations. New York, Vermont, Maryland, places like that are not going to make those moves. Essentially, it will just be an us and them, red state, blue state thing, with most, I think, of the swing states siding effectively with the GOP. You'll get some states in which they say, well, I celebrate Roe v. Wade going down, but I'm not going to do anything further because, I'm not going to rock the boat. While they get attacked potentially by evangelicals, and they'll probably get attacked from the left too, the bulk of the population, I think, wants that anyway. And the thing is this. Overturning Roe v. Wade will be cast off by the bulk of the legacy media as a ban on abortion. That's not really what it is. While I don't have a problem with Roe v. Wade's acceptance and use, it does not ban abortion when the federal government is prevented from enacting something at that level. When SCOTUS at the federal level, the highest court of the land, says, no, the previous decision's not binding anymore because it was improper, it wasn't constitutional to begin with, and shoots it down, it doesn't magically change any state's laws. It just potentially upholds Dobbs. It upholds the handful of states that have reduced the length of time in which you can get an abortion further. It upholds them and says, okay, we have no problem with that because we can't do anything from the Constitution because Roe v. Wade made no sense. I would point out as well, Congress can always make legislation at the federal level, which would be embattled and I don't think hold up based on the prospective decision here. It would be a suicidal endeavor. Congress could attempt to craft legislation to create some sort of bare minimum acceptance of abortion within the country. But Congress has to do that. What was Roe v. Wade? It wasn't a congressional action. It wasn't legislation. It was a Supreme Court decision. This would simply set it back to square one as far as the Supreme Court side say, we're not the ones to handle that. Congress, get off your ass and do something if you want to. I don't think, though, that since the majority of Americans want further limits on abortion and have no problem, I think certainly in most cases with Dobbs, I don't think that there will be any major sea change in favor of the Democrats as far as what happens in the midterms. It'll become an issue again, a political issue, and it had basically died out for a decade until this particular moment in time. It'll re-inject it as an issue, but arguably the left has lost ground on that issue in the meantime. I think acceptance of abortion, if I remember correctly, was higher like 10, 15 years ago. Has lost some of its steam since then. I think part of it is because abortion limits were further reduced among leftoid states. And that rankled people. They said, well, I have no problem with a woman getting an abortion, but this 5 months cutoff thing is crazy. You're talking about a little baby. It's no longer, you can't use the formalist massive cells argument. There are people who are only liberally religious or don't even really have skin in the game. They're like some independent voter or something. I think they find that more objectionable than the concept of further limits. Again, I may not agree with that latter sentiment, but that is the majority argument of the public. The fact is that Roe v. Wade, technically speaking, I've admitted this too, while I don't have a problem with it on a pragmatic basis, it is a really fuzzily worded workaround to a situation in which technically you are legislating from the bench. That basically is what it is. As far as Dobbs, it remains to be seen. They could theoretically say, no, Dobbs' limit is unacceptable and drag in some argument that's completely separate from anything Roe v. Wade ever stated. Unlikely, especially since Alito is doing the majority decision apparently, and he's one of the most hawkish against abortion. John Roberts apparently not being part of either the five justice majority or the 3 justices dissenting and doing his own thing, that will be very telling, I think, when we finally get the decision. And this draft, I guess, comes from February. So it's been there for a while, which indicates that if it's being released now, probably a decision's imminent in the fairly short future, which is good. It finally will get some closure on this issue. It's going to be a major thing, by the way. When the final decision comes through, all hell will break loose. I expect a lot of screeching and breakdowns among people who are on the left. I expect hyperbolic claims that this magically makes abortion illegal and isn't simply the recension of a SCOTUS decision from prior that prevented the potential banning of abortion in association with Dobbs, which forced the issue. That's about all. Peace out.